Hello there, my friends. Salamun alaikum. It's very good to be with you. I'm glad you could join me. Let me just put my camera right. So, I thought I'd share with you some various ideas, various thoughts to my subscribers because we are approaching 2,000 subscribers. And I think there's a sufficient audience now for me to just address you and not to produce material that has sort of a sensational thumbnail on YouTube and, go and chase new people and get people to click on the stuff. So I'm not so much going to be worried about getting clicks and likes, but I have a few important ideas I think that will be especially relevant to the people who are followers of my work, who are subscribers, and who support the work. And I want to give first of all a blanket thank you to all of you who have given me encouragement, you have sent me an email, who have written a positive comment under the videos. It's been very, very, it's motivated me to keep going. Because you can, as you might expect, there will be a lot of opposition to work like this. I am challenging a 1400-year-old tradition. I'm challenging a mindset that has been entrenched through 5 or 6 different empires. Not a mindset imprinted by prophets or by messengers of God. No, a mindset that was fostered, created, entrenched by sultans, by the kings of the Abbasid Empire, they ruled, by the kings of the Umayyad Empire, they ruled over Muslims, by the kings of the Ottoman Empire, they ruled over the Muslims, by the kings of the Seljuk Turks, they ruled over the Muslim Empire, by the kings of the Saudi kingdom, they ruled over the Muslims, by the kings of the Mughals, they ruled over the Muslims. So there are so many empires that grabbed hold of Islam, of the thinking of Islam, who paid the scholars, who employed the scholars. Like today, the Saudis are employing the so-called scholars. So those scholars have to toe the line. They have to speak the language of the guy who pays their salaries, and by the way, they don't want to lose their head physically, literally. So today you find in our lifetimes we are given a crystal clear lesson in the form of Palestine. We know what is right and what is wrong. You know when babies are killed. You know when innocent women are killed. It's evil. And yet you see the majority of the Muslims are standing on what side? On the side of Israel. It's a crystal clear lesson for you. If you haven't received the lesson, Allah has given you the gift at the price of 30,000 lives, innocent lives. And so, my friends, this is a thankless job, but for those of you who give me a word of thanks, and I really appreciate it. Something seriously is wrong in the house of Islam, and people like me are here. We will spend our lives, we will die questioning and trying to bring and resuscitate the idea of Islam that has become dormant. My friends, let me give you a bit of a background to where I come from and what the story is, because this is intended to go towards the subscribers. I've always been in a family. My dad, my father, he was a reading man, he was a teacher, and he was a leader figure in the community. He served in his community, he served at the mosque committee, chairperson of that mosque committee. And he naturally left behind. He died, unfortunately, very early in the prime of his life at 42. My father left. And so, unfortunately, he was lost to us. I grew up with my mom most of my life. But I have older brothers. And my older brothers, they continued the interest in religion. They had regular lives as youngsters. But we never really lost the interest in our deen. And the thing that irked us was when we moved from the city to the country, my mother moved us from the city to the country, we kind of encountered a much more constricted mindset. Because in the city, naturally, there were many ideas, a lot of tolerance for people to come with a great divergent set of ideas and thinking. Whereas in the country, we were back in a very constricted environment where the thinking was where any sort of outside of the box thinking was completely suppressed. The leader in that town had been there for when we moved there about recently, he came in about 6 or 8 years before, freshly trained in Saudi Arabia, with all those deviant and despicable teachings that the Saudis imposed in his mind. And fortunately, he was unable to impose his full agenda because the community was still on the previous version of Islam. Islam version 13 and then Islam version 14. So Islam version 13 in the Cape, at the Cape, was some sort of Ottoman Islam. And I'm going back now to the early 1900s. Because before 1900s, Islam, and when I'm speaking about my case, I think it's relevant to many countries in the world, right? So I'm highlighting our case, but I think there is some relevance to the rest of the world. So the 1800s up till the early 1900s, the Islam we had was the Ottoman version of Islam. In other words, a highly Sufi version of Islam, right? So we had a lot of Sufi practices. We had practices that were imported from Malaysia also and Indonesia, which also indirectly came from the Ottomans via, Yemen, because some of the famous people in Malaysia were actually Yemeni. In fact, the guy, the founder of Islam, I think has roots in Yemen, Tuan Guru, the founder of Islam in South Africa. So he wasn't like So the story is, we as a family moved to Paarl. Islam is now again being, revisited. A lot of the Sufi practices. We had things like a Thursday night session, a prayer session, a chanting session, where we would chant praises to God, where we chant. It is actually an extremely sociable and unifying activity. We call it the Ratibul Haddad. So it's a sequence of praises and chants that we do in a set tune, and everybody loves the tune of the Ratibul Haddad. I still know every aspect of the Ratibul Haddad. I love the Ratibul Haddad because it just says Astaghfirullah min al khataya, that kind of song, that kind of tunes. Let me just think of another one. It's beautiful. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. And nobody must come and tell me that is nonsense. Nobody must come and tell me that is not part of Islam. You see, if you become a Saudi Qur'anist, then I'm not your friend. If you want to become like a Wahhabi Qur'anist, where you ban everything in sight, you just want to do your thing, then I've got a problem with you. The Qur'an offers the parameters, not the entire life and practice of a Muslim. So the Qur'an will say, praise God, but it never says how. So we can invent, if we want to have a Thursday night dhikr, call it Ratibul Haddad, and we have the most beautiful celebrations and glorifications of God Almighty, leave me alone. I like glorifying my God. You leave me alone then. So on my channel, you're not going to hear me saying that you can't make dhikr, you can't have this, you can't do that. I'm not one of those people. So we in Paarl, and we have the new guy coming, and also this birthday celebration of the Prophet. You know what they call the Milad, or the Mawlid Rasul, or Miladun Nabi. This is also something that was then frowned upon, and we grew up amidst that tension of the new Saudi or Wahhabi version of Islam penetrating the old Sufi version of Islam, and it was a very rapid process. Throughout the 70s, 60s and 70s it unfolded. By the 80s it was complete. All the mosques were being, they had these Wahhabi trained guys that were pastoring them. And still the argument continues. So that is the conditions. But the thing that most troubled us was that the 60s and the 70s and the 80s was also a time, those were also the years, when the struggle in South Africa, the war against the white supremacist apartheid regime heated up to its full extent. So we live next to people in this country, right? Muslims. We are Muslims. We are part and parcel. We're here for hundreds of years. We are not like immigrant populations like you would imagine in Britain or in the US. No, we are not seen as an immigrant population. Yeah, that would be a joke. Yes, they see the new generations of Pakistanis and Somalis coming here. Those are clearly immigrants. They can't speak the local dialect. They can't speak English. They can't speak Afrikaans. They can't speak Zulu, Xhosa. So they are seen as migrants. But in South Africa, we, the Muslims of the early generations, you know, my grandmother is a Malay. She's the descendant of a slave. Slaves were brought here in the 1600s and in the 1700s. So my Malay features that you see come from my grandmother, and we are indigenous to this country. We are indigenous to this country. Yet we were prepared. Most of the Muslims, most of these priests at the mimbars on Friday, they were prepared to see a civil war unfolding against the white racist regime and not say a word, my friends. Not say a word. The way you see the Palestinians being treated in a subhuman way, in a callous and heartless way, shooting, killing, abandoning them, even worse. You know, in some aspects, I realize that the Palestinians are being shot at with missiles and bombs, and we've never had that in South Africa. But what we did have here was a type of poverty and neglect that Palestinians don't even experience. You know, the type of separating men and women, putting the men into working camps like slavery, and letting the women live in those distant, what they call homelands, and the men have to work in these, these barren townships with nothing. They sleep. I've been inside a men's compound, because in South Africa men were separated from women. They needed black people to work near the factories, but they wouldn't allow the women to join them. So I went into the compound once where the men worked. I'm trying to give you an image of apartheid, right? So that you can see why it made us active and why we questioned the Muslim community. I went because as I grew up, when I hit the age of 17 or 18, I went to university. I realized I went to university in the city. I realized something is amiss. There's a big problem here. Most of my country's people are being severely oppressed and mistreated. And I went to visit black African people in my city were never really allowed to mix with the so-called Malays, and because Cape Town has a huge population that is not white and not black African. So they are like me, they are called, interestingly, colored. We are referred to as colored because there's no other word. But I like to call us South Africa's only truly anti-racial people. We are post-racial. And so these, in the West, they often refer to the so-called mixed race people of Cape Town as mixed race. They're not particularly black African and they're not white. So the biggest population of Cape Town, about 60% of Cape Town consists of people that look like me. Right? Cape Town, that is, we are the people of Cape Town. The most typical feature of a Cape Townian is probably somewhere between what I look like, and maybe the hair texture could change a bit, or or the facial bone structure could change a bit more to have like a Khoisan, So you have from Khoisan, Indian, Malay, all of those features here in Cape Town. When I visited a black African compound, which you had to get access to, you have to go through a particular access point, I realized that there's something very, very big wrong. People had to sleep on concrete beds, no mattresses, concrete beds. And the concrete was simply a concrete sort of platform that came out of the wall, and there were 3 levels on top, 3 levels, that were vertically built into the wall. And I looked at that setup and I just thought, wow, what a lack of decency and respect they have for these people. But as the 70s war on the revolution heated up in South Africa, and now people started openly clashing with the police on the streets, and I often was caught in those clashes. I was beaten up, I was, shot at. Everything happened through the 70s and the 80s. And guess what happened in the mosques? We were condemned. We were condemned in the mosque, my friends. I'm not lying to you. And you might ask, why is Anwar always saying something positive about the Christians? And here's why. I'm going to tell you why now. My religion is very clear, and I am not insecure about my confession of faith that La ilaha illallah. Allah is one. There's no 3. I'm very, very committed. I die with that confession of faith. But the Christians have a special place in my heart, not only because my first teachers were Christian people who were kind and gentle to me. I was the only Muslim in the classroom. I was the only Muslim in the classroom from my first year of school until my 5th or 6th year of school. And those teachers treated me like royalty always. My teachers, and remember I said I'm born in a colored community in South Africa. The mixed race community had their own mixed race schools. That was the apartheid system. We never had whites in our class or black Africans. But those teachers were as kind as you can be. I remember never ever being mistreated. Now there could be stories of children that were mistreated by their teachers, but it wasn't me. But more than that, why I have an affinity and why I always have the greatest of respect for my Christian family, for my Christian brothers and sisters, is that when we were battling the apartheid regime and I became a soldier in that war, I enlisted, I volunteered to be an operative, and together I went on raids against the infrastructure of the apartheid system. We committed any act of sabotage that we could, that was possible to us with our limited weapons. I went and I became a part-time soldier in the evenings, and we would go and we would, commit any damage to the system. Besides that, I assisted with being a distributor of any revolutionary information, pamphlets, booklets, etc. So during the night, when everyone was asleep, we would go and throw pamphlets in every box in the neighborhood. 1,000 pamphlets we would go and distribute. We would make the streets unusable by blocking with barricades so that the apartheid police could not enter the neighborhood. So that was me and my friends, and we had a little small task force of maybe 6 or 7 guys, and we were very active. During the day, I was teaching at the school in one of these African townships where there were children but no teachers, so I, by that time, was a mathematics teacher. And I became a teacher in 1985. I started teaching. I was not yet fully qualified. I qualified a few years later, 2 years later. But just to get into work, I had to work with, not the full teacher's qualification. But it was in 1985 that I also went and taught in the African, black African people were kept separate. And I realized that they had no teacher. They were expected to pass the year with zero teacher at the school. And I volunteered my services, and for a few years I was a mathematics teacher at my school, where I earned a small salary, and at night I was a mathematics teacher at a school called that time Simon Hebe High School. So I took those children there, and then I also had some other friends that joined me there, and we provided some teaching at that school. And with the grace of Allah, and thanks to Him, it still hurts my heart to think about those people, how the neglected they had to undergo. Most of that class passed mathematics, and it is so heartwarming to see those kids that passed mathematics, that they are now grown, and they will always have this love and respect for me and for us for having come there at night and taught there. You're wondering, why is South Africa pro-Palestine, my friends? You are wondering sometimes, why is South Africa such a pro-Palestine country when the Arabs don't even support Palestine, with the exception of Yemen and Iraq and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Maybe to some extent Algeria nowadays, and I've heard some positive things from Libya. You're wondering, why is a country at the southern tip of Africa so pro-Palestine? My brothers and sisters, it is because there were a substantial number of Muslims in South Africa that jumped into the anti-racist struggle here, to the anti-Apartheid struggle. There were maybe enough Muslims that went into the black African controlled townships and provided teaching to those kids. Maybe there were enough, like one of my primary teachers, a man by the name of Ahmad Qasim. His teacher, and the man who inspired him, is a man by the name of Imam Abdullah Harun. He is also a leader figure in South Africa. Now, Imam Abdullah Harun is one of the first revisionists. He's not to the level that I've taken it, and I'm not claiming any sort of comparison with Imam Abdullah Harun. I'm a small little ant on the floor next to him. But he was a man who tackled the system. He tackled the traditional ideas that were spread in Islam, and he was telling the Muslims that politics is not outside of the framework of Islam. And he joined the struggle against apartheid, and he was locked up, arrested for many months, and eventually killed. It was found now recently, because they always hid the way he died. 3 months ago, there was a finding in court that he was actually murdered by the apartheid system. So there's a imam for you, a Muslim leader that took the example of Musa, Harun, and went to the oppressor and confronted the oppressor, and did everything else to confront the oppressor. Now here's my problem, you see. The Muslim clergy, the priests of his time, they never raised a finger. They never raised a finger. It was a Christian priest, it was a Christian reverend who had a vigil, who had a vigil, and he stayed he stopped his life, and he was stationed at some sort of public place, and he stopped. That is where he went and secluded himself until the release of the Imam Harun. That was a Christian man, a white Christian priest. Not one finger moved by any Muslim. Also, the Christians, when we needed money to pay for somebody who was arrested, to get them out, bail, to pay their bail, and the apartheid system had a court and they had bail, but they knew we didn't have money. So they would set a bail of 10,000 South African rand. And then these youngsters were guaranteed not to come out of prison because they never had a 10,000. They didn't have a 10 South African rand in their pocket. And I would go to not I myself, but some of us, some representatives of the struggle, would go to the World Council of Churches, to the South African, Reformed Church, I think under Alan Busak and under Desmond Tutu and these guys. And they would secure enough money to free these guys from jail. And that was the money. I myself, in 1986, I was arrested on very serious charges. I was arrested twice. The first time I was arrested on charges of arson and other things, and that was a guaranteed 15-year sentence. But by late 1985, I received support from the church establishment, and we just couldn't get the Muslim establishment to assist me. So the Christian establishment, and I didn't compromise in any way, and they didn't ask me to become a Christian or anything, but my defense, my bail money, everything was paid completely. I mean, it comes to tens of thousands of dollars. You might know how expensive it is to fight a case in court using an advocate, because for that type of charge, I needed an advocate, what is called, senior counsel, or I don't know what you call it in Britain. It's the higher level of defense. It's not just an ordinary attorney, you see. So, but that's not all. Here comes more stories about my respect for my Christian brothers and sisters. That we would call meetings, right, where we try to educate people about the apartheid system and rally them around the struggle, rally them around the revolution. And we call these meetings, and we looked for a venue, and then we would go to the Muslim venues. We asked them, listen, you've got a hall here. We need a small hall for 300 or 400, 500 people to gather. We need to inform people. That was before internet, remember? It was before social media. We had to spread the word by word of mouth. And sometimes you had to have an instant mass meeting to share some ideas, or for the community to put forward some suggestions. Muslims refused to give their venues. The Muslims refused to give their venues. Plain and simple. In fact, we would always have those meetings in churches, in church halls, because not all church halls, some churches were not willing to give, but there was one or two church groupings that would always allow us to meet in their church hall. And that's another thing. But now here comes another point I have to mention, is the callousness of the Muslims. No? The callousness of the Muslims. Once there was a case where they did say yes. Once, the exception. They said, okay, you can use the hall at the Muslim madrasa. And we then organized the people, right? We invited speakers from Cape Town. That was in a town, small town. We invited the speakers. The town is about an hour's drive from Cape Town. So these guys drove all the way. And then on the morning of the meeting, we found this Muslim venue, the hall completely locked. Absolutely locked. All the doors locked. No access. And obviously we can't break down doors. Every door is locked. Every access point to the hall is locked. And we're trying to call the guy, the trustee who's in charge of the keys, and he switched his phone off, or he's not answering his phone. My friends, that type of callous behavior, where they actually had no choice but to give us the venue, but then they took another they opted for another response, and that was to just simply not open it up for us. You can imagine the embarrassment when we had people pitching up there, the speakers, the public, and how we felt by not being able to continue with the meeting. Why am I telling you these things, my friends? I'm telling you these things so that you can understand who I am, where I come from, the struggle we had against apartheid. And then suddenly, in 1994, the Muslims forgot all about their sordid acquiescence, their sordid silence in the face of apartheid, and they suddenly came forward and they wanted to enjoy the benefits of a free South Africa. They suddenly were given the opportunities to go and study to become doctors and lawyers and airplane pilots and whatever South Africa was offering, senior positions in the military and in the police. Because South Africa opened up in 1994. It became a new place. Everything changed from, it was a revolution. It was a whole change. Unfortunately, it was a revolution where Muslims weren't in charge. So it went into a direction that we're not really satisfied with. But I'm giving you this background to illustrate to you why I am so convinced that the Muslims of my community are asleep. They are not. You see, when we came to that small town with our fathers, with a bit of teachings of my father, the books that he left for me, some of the books, in fact, one of the books is a translation of the Qur'an that goes back to 1930. It's the original translation of Yusuf Ali. It's a treasure. I treasure this. 2 volumes. The translation book, he always told us, he left behind a translation of the Qur'an for us, and we always read the translation. From the time I was a child, I read the Qur'an as in translation, not only reciting it. He left behind a work by Amir Ali, Spirit of Islam. Now, if you know Amir Ali, is it Amir Ali? I think it's Amir Ali. You can check that book. It's called Spirit of Islam. No, wait. I'm not talking about the book by Muhammad, the Qadiani, right? I'm talking about Amir Ali. I'm not sure if it's Spirit of Islam, but this is a Mu'tazila writer who wrote a complete overview of Islam. Absolute amazing book that covers all the rituals and all the philosophy of Islam. I just can't get to the name. I think it's Spirit of Islam. Amir Ali. Please tell me in the comments if you know this book. But my dad left that book, and I studied that book. I read that book cover to cover, and he was obviously a rationalist writer, and it made complete sense the way he explained it, because he was also a non-sectarian kind of writer. You couldn't put him in a box. You couldn't say he was a Shi'i. I think he was a Zaydi Shi'i, because he did speak favorably about Imam Ali. But obviously this book was long before this revolution in Iran, and so it was just like theoretical ideas. It obviously became real when the whole Shi'i Sunni thing came up, with the Saudis pushing the sectarian ideas, and some of the characters within Iran also pushing Shia sectarianism, and then it became a big deal, and we had to endure that kind of silly polemics also for 10 years, which I think I've outgrown. Certainly, I don't recognize Sunni versus Shi'i. So my brothers and sisters, this is just a background video to share with you where I'm coming from, why the revisionist attitude. And the impression I have, I'm a man of 60 now, and I've given you a history since the age of 17. My brothers and I have always been looking for ways of enlightening our community, of correcting the understanding, because we know for a fact it wasn't right of them to be asleep or to be silent or to ban us from the mosques during apartheid. It wasn't right of them to come with Wahhabi Islam here and so on and try and make that the mainstream, or Tabligh Islam, which is not too far from Wahhabi Islam. So we have Tabligh versus Barelvi, we have Wahhabi versus Sunni. So that is the type of fights that Muslims have here. And then on top of that, you have Sunni versus Shi'i, which is not such a broad fight, but also in that mix. So the history of the channel, since we're on 2,000 subscribers almost, goes back to COVID. When I was very ill, And I was ill, and the propaganda around me was saying that you'll probably die. And I thought, wow, am I going to die? And I had a lot of time to lay in my bed in my weakened state, because COVID does weaken you substantially, the fatigue, the lack of energy. And in that weakened state, lying in bed for about, I think it was 2 days to a month. I think it was really a month later that I got out of that. I had a lot of time to reflect on my life, and I thought that, look, I've always been a researcher. I've always read, I've always studied, I've written a few works, just self-published works. I've done a few things, and I've had a passion for my deen, but I've never really had an outlet, because I wasn't allowed, you see, to give my message locally. Locally, the mimbars, the pulpits are under control of the Wahhabis and under the control of whoever else, the Shia and the sectarians. They want their message only to be given there. And I was lying in bed, and I thought, it would be I would feel unfulfilled if I should pass away in this bed without having at least shared the message that I've accumulated and read and studied for 20, 30, 40 years. And I made a promise to myself that is going to change. I'm not going to wait for the time when I'm a charismatic, confident, out there preacher, loved by the people. I'm not going to wait for that. And that was always subconsciously I was telling myself, look here, you're not charismatic. You don't have the gift of the gab. You're just a guy who has read a lot, and maybe you can articulate it somewhat. But in no way material to go and lead or educate people in mass. And that is what I told myself. And so what I'll do is I'll always just be a sort of part of a little committee, or advise somebody, or give comments here and there. And we had our own Muslim breakaway organizations and madrasas. So I played a role there on a very small scale. That changed when I had COVID. I thought, look, Musa, when he was commissioned, and obviously I came across these verses. When Musa was commissioned by Allah, he says, Ya Allah, uhlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. So why would Musa say, remove the knot from my tongue? And I've heard one other preacher say that Musa had a speech impediment, and he wasn't really the most articulate of people. He had a brilliant heart and a very, very courageous attitude. But in terms of articulation, he wasn't really out there. And that is why he says, Uhlul uqdatan min lisani. Ya Allah, if you want me to undertake this mission to confront Pharaoh and to revive and revisit the lies that these people have been creating, please let my speech be smooth and straight, and let me speak the truth and not stutter and stumble and fumble. And so Allah probably granted it to him, but Allah also sent his brother with him, Harun. Because Harun, again, on the other hand, was a more articulate guy, was a more charismatic guy. When I lay in bed during COVID, I thought, I have such a brother. And I'm not, we are not prophets and messengers. We try to emulate them. We are all teachers of the people. And when I say I am emulating Musa, I'm emulating Rasul, I'm not saying I am Musa, I'm Muhammad. I'm an ant on the dust next to them, and not even that. But you cannot stop me from trying to emulate them. And that is what I try to do, is I try to emulate Musa. And I thought to myself, I have a brother who's a really charismatic man. He's a man of more means than I am. Let me start something with him. And as soon as I was able to get out of bed, in fact, I was still in bed, and I made a call to him, and I said to him, Brother Rustam, please, we need to start something. We need to teach our people, man. And he said, I'm ready if you're ready. And when I was out of bed, we said, right, we're going to start this college where we will take in, we had a whole blueprint and we had meetings, and suddenly we realized that, how many people can you teach in a college? You can teach 20 people, but then you've got to get bursaries for those 20 people. Will we get the people there? That's the question, because people are often busy with work. They don't have the energy, the time to come. And we said, okay, let's start something small. Let's not have the college, let's have and Zoom was big that time. Let's start a Zoom class. And we invited everyone, and we started our Zoom class on a Friday night for 2 hours. We tuned into Zoom. I was the guy doing the presentation. I shared my information, my understanding, my knowledge of the Qur'an. And we had about 20 people joining the Zoom on a Friday night. And my brothers and sisters, that Zoom that started with 20 people, eventually we said, look, but we should actually make it available on YouTube. And I quickly taught myself about YouTube and about operating the computer and the camera and the software. And within a short time, we were actually parallel broadcasting on Zoom and on YouTube. At some point, we realized, but why do we need Zoom? People can just click on the link. We can spread the link, and then, we can have people on YouTube. And questions and answers, I could always make available, this comment section, or we can have a separate Zoom. But unfortunately, that fell away. The interactive part fell away. And the channel was launched, I think, in June 2022, if I'm not mistaken. I think we're busy 2 years now. I'm not so sure. I think the first videos could have been 2021. What was the big COVID year? 2020. So it could have been 2021. So 3 years going. Alhamdulillah, that is where we are right now. And you have joined from all over the world. I check my my analysis on YouTube Studio. Obviously, we don't have much details, but we can see at least where the viewers come from, and I have an equal spread between the US, Britain, and South Africa, and I'm very grateful for that. I've on average like 1,000 views on videos that become very popular. I've 5,000-6,000 views. For a person like me, alhamdulillah, the message is going much further than I would have been on my own. And my dream is that I'm affecting the parents of tomorrow, people who will have to teach their deen, their understanding, their philosophical understanding of the world to their children, people who are professionals, who will share their philosophical outlook, their religious outlook to their colleagues. Even scholars, even teachers, because I have teachers here. I have people who are, you won't believe this, I have Maulanas, not many, maybe 2 or 3, that have written to me and said, keep it going. This is what should be done. I was contacted the other day by a very close friend in the northern part of South Africa, and he says to me, look, there's a small little school where there's a group of Muslim students who are learning to become, now they might be listening to this, and I'm not going to mention names, don't worry, but how heartwarming it is to hear that that group is also watching the videos, are not sort of condemning of the videos, but are open to the ideas, maybe not agreeing with everything, but are ready to engage with the ideas. Now that's a small college where future Muslim scholars are being trained, and they are engaging with the videos. So my friends, you can imagine, I have people who write to me and say, I was on the verge of becoming murtad. I was on the verge of dumping Islam because the Muslims are not really it's not my cup of tea. And I can't be part of them. And I'm ready to go back, and I'll just be a deist or a theist. I'll just believe in God without religion. And my friends, those people have written to me and said to me, finally, I have a understanding that works for me. So my brothers and sisters, this is just a video to my friends, my subscribers, and to all of you that I have deep love for you, that you are engaging with the videos. I have respect for you. We are here not for this world. We are here to invest our time and effort for others to reap the reward, for others to benefit, as they say, to pay it forward, and hopefully to earn closeness, to earn acceptance, to earn satisfaction from our Lord, the Creator, the Supreme, the Master of the universe. And if I can have His acceptance and His satisfaction, then that is all I need. As Rabia al-Adawiyah said, God, if I worship you because I want to earn paradise, then don't ever allow me into paradise. And if I worship you because I'm afraid of hell, burn me in that hell. But if I worship you simply because of desiring closeness and your love and your acceptance, then please grant me that. And that is pretty much how I feel about this work and this mission. Thank you for watching, and thank you for bringing my subscribers close to 2,000, inshallah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.